Good afternoon, everybody. This is Joanne Lacey from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Thank you for joining today's webinar. This webinar is part of MEF's monthly analyst briefing series. For those of you who aren't familiar with MEF's programs, then we're a global trade body and the voice of the mobile ecosystem. Our members look at the trends and issues across a number of different ecosystems, including advertising, enterprise communications, and personal data. Today, we'll be focusing on the payment ecosystem, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Matteo Risi, who is a research fellow from the Digital Innovation Observatories at the School of Management, which is part of the Politecnico in Milan. The Digital Innovation Unit was set up 20 years ago and is all about raising awareness around different topics in digital innovation and is a highly regarded think tank. So we're delighted to have Matteo join us today. And the session is going to look at the work that the Mobile Payment and Commerce Observatory focuses on when it comes to advanced payment systems, concentrating, of course, in particular on mobile payments. So I'll hand over to Matteo, who's firstly going to share a global overview of the work their ongoing work that the university does when it comes to understanding the mobile payments landscape, so looking at different innovations, use cases, and highlighting key market trends. We're going to be looking at the enabling technologies that are driving the payment sector, as well as looking at different issues, be it around devices and voice assistants, as well as key processes and regulations such as PSD2. So we'll then take a quick look at the Italian market. Obviously, the guys from the Politecnico have a wealth of information to share, and mobile commerce Italy is a key market for mobile commerce. So it's a good opportunity to take a deep dive and look at some of the growth forecasts and trends in that local market. If you would like to ask any questions during the presentation, then please use the Q&A functionality that you can see on Ring Central, and then we'll ask those questions of Matteo, and we will pause after the global presentation and can ask any questions then, and likewise if you've got any specific questions about the Italian market, then Matteo will be happy to help, I'm sure. So with that, I will hand over to Matteo, and thank you for sharing your insights.
Thanks, Joanne, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm a research fellow in the University of Politecnico di Milano. And as Joanne said you before, I work in the Digital Innovation Observatories. I will speak briefly about what we do. In this presentation, you can see our different observatories. We started 20 years ago, and we are now focusing on 40 different thematics. Mine is the one about innovative payments, and what we want to do is to create knowledge, create awareness on these markets and on the impact that these innovations have on businesses, on different businesses. So as you can see, our main objectives are creating research, knowledge, communicating this knowledge, create a network around these thematics with different companies that funds and supports our researches, and keep all the market updated on the innovation that come by. Our observatory is at the 11th edition. And as you can see, we had very different approaches to this theme. We were mobile payment and commerce. Now we are innovative payments, because we like to be always up to date, and so looking always at the future. And that is what I want to do also today with you. So let's start with the innovative trends that we have seen in this payment landscape. We divided them into 3 layers. The core part is made up by enabling technologies. So here we have all the infrastructures, all the schemes that enable all the different payment methods. Then we have a middle layer that is made up by the devices and the interfaces that can be used in order to pay. And then, of course, at the end, we can build up processes and customer experiences by combining these Lego pieces in different manners. Let's start by the enabling technologies, by the core. The first enabling technologies that we have identified is OpenAPI. As you know, the European regulator has created a new directive, a new payment service directive that forces banks to open up the financial data of their customers to third-party providers, and it forces them to do this by using the protocols of the API. That's a huge innovation that is created by the legislation, because these third-party providers, they can disintermediate the banks in their relationships with the client. So we have now 2 different new actors that are payment initiation service provider and account information service provider that may be used by the clients of the banks in order to handle their financial data and to handle their payments without using the bank ecosystem, but using whatever service they prefer. Of course, these new actors, they need to be authorized both by the clients and by the national central banks. Without this authorization, they could not take any data from the banks. Here we have some international cases. BBVA is a Spanish international bank that starting from 2015, so well before PSD2, started to open up marketplace on its website that it can be used by developers to integrate with the bank accounts of BBVA's client. Citibank decided, is a British bank, decided to exploit PSD2 by becoming itself a payment initiation service provider, and by offering its client the possibility to interact also with other bank accounts that are not Citibank's bank accounts, and to initiate payments through Citibank. Plaid is an American startup. It's a unicorn. It now worth over $2 billion, and it works on exactly in this field, in the field of APIs and in the field of the middleware between third-party providers and the banks. Another enabling technologies, in our opinion, is artificial intelligence. When we think about artificial intelligence, we usually think about the front office of artificial intelligence. So we think about chatbots, and we think about virtual assistants. And that's, of course, one of the main usage of artificial intelligence also in the payment arena. There are different chatbots and virtual assistants that are now beginning to handle the purchasing process and also the payment in different messaging applications or in the smart speaker that we have at home. Then, of course, we have the use of artificial intelligence in the back office of the companies for business intelligence, of course, but most importantly, in the payment area for the identification of frauds and the identification of suspicious transactions in order to stop them before they become real frauds. Here we have some example. As I told you, we have, for example, Digibot and Casisto that work in the front office area and that create chatbots and conversational artificial intelligence that understands the natural language and is able to respond to the requests of the clients. And then Frogster that is concentrated on reducing and identifying suspicious transactions. The third enabling technology that we have identified is instant payment. For us, it is very important because in Europe, we had a new payment scheme that was launched 2 years ago for the whole Europe, and that enables the customer to move money from one bank account to another bank account in less than 10 seconds, 24/7 and 365 days a year. So for us, that is a very, very huge innovation. And what is very, very interesting on instant payment is that we can use these new infrastructures that is not just in Europe, but it has been built also in Australia, USA, and so on. But it can be also the transfer from one bank account to another bank account can be also immediate, even if we don't rely on this new payment scheme, but if we rely on the on consortium of banks that come together in order to create instant messaging, instant money transfer by coming together and by deciding a standard that it can be used by the customers. So in these examples, we have 5 different services built by the national banks of these 5 countries, and that offer this instant money transfer in the P2P, P2B, and online transactions. The last but not least enabling technology is the blockchain. So blockchain is a distributed ledger that allows to make transactions, not just financial transactions, but mainly, let's say mainly transactions with a value between a network of participants without the control of a central authority that needs to validate the transactions. And this is the real innovation that we have with blockchain. So technology and algorithms can self-control a network in order to put apart the central authorities, the central banks, and give a service that allows people to send value through each other without these central authorities. Bitcoin is the first and most famous example. We have different problems with Bitcoins. For example, the volatility of its value, but also problems related to the economies of scale of Bitcoin. These problems can be handled with new blockchains. For example, we have the examples of the Lightning Network that enables the management of a larger amount of transactions, larger than Bitcoin. And we have also new blockchains that are created by companies. And in particular, I've mentioned the Telegram Open Network that has been built by Telegram, and it will be live probably in November of 2019. And the blockchain by Facebook that has been announced in June, with a very large set of international companies, big international companies that are baking this new service. Service that will be live in 2020, and that promises to make payments accessible also to the unbanked and to everyone through the Facebook network. When we go and see the interface layer, the devices, the first most important device that we can use in order to pay is the smartphone. So it's the mobile technology. Smartphone, it can really become our new wallet, because we have it always in our pocket, and because of its specific technological features. We can use it to do different interactions and different payments. The first interactions that we can do is the mobile commerce. So using my smartphone in order to purchase online. We can also use the smartphone in order to pay online, and that is what we call mobile remote payment. So, for example, the payment of a phone top-up, the payment of a bill, the payment of a fine, and so on. That is different from the mobile commerce because we don't have a purchasing experience, a shopping experience, but just the payment. And then, of course, the mobile proximity payment. So the payment that we do with our smartphone in a store. And we can do it thanks to different technologies, different modalities. The first one that you can see in this slide is NFC. So in this case, a card is virtualized on the smartphone, and the smartphone simulates the contactless experience and the contactless signals of a contactless payment with a POS terminal. So in this case, we use the smartphone, but the experience is the same, and the let's say the scheme is the same as the one we use of the card, of the contactless cards. Then, of course, we have also other types of payments, other types of schemes. In this case, we have some money, some e-money stored in the applications that I want to use, in the wallets that I want to use, and I can connect with the merchant through, for example, a QR code, as we see in China with Alipay and WeChat Pay, or through an RFID tag, but the logic is the same as the QR code. So I connect with the merchant to identify the merchant, and then I send the money as in a P2P transaction. And geolocation. So I open my wallet, I see what are the nearby merchants. I select the one in which I'm currently purchasing and I'm currently paying, and then I send the money in the same way as if I had used a QR code. These are the two the two countries with the most, the highest usage of mobile proximity payments. The first one is China, and as I told you, here we have two super apps that are Alipay and WeChat Pay that they started as, for example, WeChat Pay started as an instant messaging platform, and then it became ubiquitous in the life of its customers. Also, in the same way, Alipay, it has become a lifestyle app that it can be used in order to pay, to send money to friends, to pay online, to pay in store. While in USA, we have a more mixed approach, and we have a lot of wallets that work with the NFC technology. So they work with the card schemes, they work with the POS terminals, also because the infrastructure in USA is more diffused than in China. Other devices that we can use in order to pay are becoming the smart objects. We can use different kind of objects that are connected in order to make payments. The first example are the wearables. So I use the wearable as a payment card because in the wearable I have an NFC chip. So the experience is exactly the same as mobile proximity payment transaction with NFC. So a contactless transaction. Then we have also objects that are not wearable and that are called smart objects. One example is are the connected cars, and other examples are the smart appliances that we have in our homes. One of the most recent cases of smart objects that work together in order to make payments is Amazon Dash replenishment. Amazon Dash replenishment works with smart appliances that are able to understand if they're going out of something. For example, a printer that can monitor and its ink level, and that can communicate directly to Amazon that the ink is going to finish, is running out, and that the customer needs to send a replenishment order directly in Amazon. Some international cases. Here we have some cases of wearables. For example, token, it's a wearable ring that can be used to pay in store. Then, of course, we have fitness trackers, and also other types of wearables, sunglasses. Also, Costa Coffee has created a smart cup with this NFC chip. The last interface that we can use is the interface of the voice assistants. So we can speak with our smart speakers that we can put in our homes, or we can speak with the voice assistants that we have in our smartphones that are able to answering our requests, and that are able through different, for example, chatbots or programs to create a purchasing experience that can be controlled just by the voice. So here we have 2 examples. We can, for example, in Italy, we can use a Siri with our iPhones to send the P2P payments through different applications such as PayPal. But also it is important to underline that a lot of companies are working in the voice assistants world, and one of the most active industry is the one of the car makers. So in this example, you can see that Mercedes-Benz is it has developed its own voice assistants that can be used by the driver of Mercedes-Benz in order to ask for information, but also in order to send some orders, some orders directly by voice and directly from the car to different merchants. The last layer is the one related to the processes. It is important to underline that the payment is just the final step of a purchasing process. So the purchasing process nowadays is becoming more omni-channel, because the customers they want to use different channels in order to interact with the companies, and the companies need to create a smooth experience independently from the channel. And many companies are working also to reduce the friction of the payment and reduce the friction of the checkout process through invisible payments or through stores that are checkout-less. One of the most important examples, the most famous examples, is Amazon Go. In this case, we have highly automated stores that can recognize the customers while they come in, and that can identify what the customers are taking and putting in their basket. Another example is the one of Alipay, that is working on cashierless store and stores without cash register and highly automated. The last Lego pieces that we have identified, it's related to identification. The identification of the payer is very important. Nowadays, we expect to be identified even if we don't have a payment card with us. We want the merchant to identify me, so I can send him the money even if I don't have money with me. So in this direction are going all the governments that work on digital identity and mobile identity and the identification of the customers, of the citizens. That is very important, not just for payments, but also in the remote interaction with both companies and the government, so that I can register a contract online without the necessity of a physical presence by using my digital identity and not by using myself physically. Biometrics is something that it's going in this direction. We can use our fingerprint in order to authenticate in our mobile phone applications, and even when we are paying through our mobile phones. We can also, there are some examples of companies and service providers that are working on biometric payments worldwide. One example is Alipay in China. That is it has built some terminals that are able to recognize the face of the clients, and with the pre-registration of Alipay, they can match the actual face of who is paying with the face of their client on their databases, in order to allow him to pay without using anything but its face. Here we have some examples of international mobile and digital identity solutions. It is in Italy, we are still beginning this transition, that it has been made by, for example, by India, with over 1 billion of digital identities issued, thanks to the strong commitment of the government. And also in Sweden, where the banks of the country come up together and decided to use the verified information of the bank accounts as a digital identity solution. So in Sweden, if a citizen wants to authenticate himself online, it can use Bank ID that it's no more than the information that it has used in order to open its bank account. So these are all the components that we have identified. We have also other components that we were not able to put in this presentation, and we believe that the combination, the original combination of different components, maybe it may create a good services and good customer experiences. So that was the first section of the presentation. If you have some Q&A, I will be happy to respond.
Thanks, Matteo. So that was a lot of information and a fantastic overview of a complicated landscape. There's obviously a lot of different innovations happening in different countries and across the areas that you've covered today. The first question we have online is actually around the the last topic on identity, and it's a very good question, and one close to many MEF members' businesses and hearts. So it's from Pambos, and is talking about so the identification of payers. So the consumer is important, but equally important is the identification of the service or goods provider. So, and the question is, how will this be done in a manner that will ensure that the man in the middle and spoofing attacks are not a factor? So this is about verifying the identity of the business of the provider of the goods and services. Do you have any insights there? What's happening from a technology point of view when it comes to identity of the and verification of the provider, and whose responsibility is that, I guess?
Okay, that's a very good question. A very good question. I just have two examples of how we can identify the receiver of the payment. One example is the use of something that only the payer knows, and that, for example, his bank can ask him at the beginning of the registration, for example, of a card. So if my bank asks me just type some a phrase that it's yours and that we can show you when you are doing a payment. So if I am in an e-commerce environment, I use this card, and the one that is receiving the payment, thanks to the pop-up of the payment service provider of the issuer of my card, shows me the phrase that I've chosen before. I'm in that case, I am comfortable. I am secure that this payment it's going through my bank, and not through other. Also, in this case, I think that it may be very useful, the tokenization of the payment. So card payments will be more and more replaced. Card details will be more and more replaced by tokens that are univocally related to to the receiver of the payment. So in that case, if the payment service providers work with tokenization, my card details won't be disclosed anymore, and the payment that I do will be linked just to that receiver, and won't be cannot be used for other purposes.
Okay. Thank you. And sticking with the topic of fraud, you mentioned at the start around enabling technologies and AI having a key role to play in fraud detection. Can you talk a little bit more about that, or share some examples there?
Okay. We are researching this topic.
Okay.
Right in these days. The amount of information related to a payment is increasing. For example, the payment card schemes such as MasterCard, Visa, and so on have built in the last months, in the last years, new communication pipelines that can share more information than before. So we can share the information of the geolocation of the payers, the device that is used by the payers, and so on. So that information and the information about the past transaction with that card. So all these information are very, very, very useful in order to detect if there is something that it's not going as
as planned.
yes, as planned. And for example, if I always pay from Italy, and one day I'm paying from China, this information can be shared through my to my bank and to the bank of the receiver, and they can understand that something is not going well. So fraud detection works with this information, with the big data information.
And you see AI and machine learning being a key part of that going forward.
Okay, yeah, of course, because using a set of fraud transactions, machine can understand if there are some patterns, and they learn by analyzing these patterns and by using this knowledge, this analysis on actual frauds to let's say block future frauds.
Okay, thank you. One last question. I think I'm just conscious of time, so before we move on to looking at the forecasts of the Italian market, I just wanted to come back on around PSD2. So obviously the new regulation has came into effect now in September, and all the payment providers have been working hard to meet that deadline. You mentioned at the start of your presentation that open APIs are one of the innovations that are enabled by this new regulation. I guess I've got two questions. What kind of companies are the ones that are interested in open APIs? And more broadly, when it comes to the regulation, what are the other opportunities and impacts that PSD2 has brought to the payments ecosystem?
Okay. What are the companies that are interested in APIs? We have studied all the companies that had asked for a license to
Right.
the national bank authorities, and we have found 200 companies, mainly startup and mainly related to financial services, that they want to offer account aggregation services. They want to offer credit scoring services,
Okay.
and payment initiation services.
Okay.
But we also saw that there are many banks that are working on that, and one company that is important is Google. It has asked for this license, so we will see what they will come up with. For concern the second question, okay, OpenAPI is just one part of the PSD2. We also have another core part of the PSD2 that is related to strong customer authentication.
Okay.
And that is it deals with the card payments online. With this new regulation, issuers and acquirers, so the banks of the merchant, the bank of the payers, they need to put in place some communication between them, thanks also to 3D Secure, that is it has been built by MasterCard, Visa, and all the card payment scheme, for what we said before on the frauds. And To authenticate a payment, who is paying will need to use two factors, something that the payers only the payers have, for example, the smartphone, and something that the payers only the payers knows, for example, a PIN or a password. This factor can be replaced by something that the payer that only the payer has, and that is biometrics. But this will increase the friction in the online transactions. Another part is related, for example, on the changing on the rules about direct carrier billing. The regulator has it has changed the perimeter of this payment method that can be used up to a certain limit, that is €50 for a transaction, for each single transaction. And they can be used to buy digital contents or transportation tickets and so on. So we have also this kind of changes.
Super. Yeah, it's a regulation that seems to have been a long time coming, but it's good to see you know the different how it supports the different innovations in payments as rather than only barriers. So that's positive. Good. I think. Just given the time that we should move back to the rest of the presentation, spend the last part of this webinar looking at the Italian market.
Okay. Now worth 240 billion euros. That is something like 30% of what we spend in Italy, what we spent in Italy in 2018. The growth rate is it's about 10%, and but we are still one of the last countries in Europe. As you can see, the best performers are the Nordics with Great Britain. They spend with the cards, with digital payments, around more than 300 times per person per year. So one payment per day. Let's say one payment per day per person. We are still well behind the mean for you the European average, and we are at 50 transactions per year. Behind us we have with us we have Germany, and behind us we have just 3 countries: Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece. So we need to work on that, because we still love so much the cash and the cash payments. We also have a framework that we use in order to classify what we call the new digital payments. And we divided it by the device that is used. So we have we can use the PC for e-commerce transactions. We can use the mobile, both remotely for mobile commerce transactions, and in store for mobile proximity payment transactions. And we can use some innovation that stem from the card ecosystem. So one example is contactless payments, and the other example is the mobile POS. So how also the accepting infrastructure is changing with the POS that are mobile, that are connected to smartphone, and that use the smartphone 4G connection in order to manage the payments. The new digital payments in Italy are about 80 billion euros. They are constantly increasing, and one of the part that is increasing the most, it's related to contactless payments. As you see, we had a boom in 2015 and 2016, but our banks and all the payment schemes are working on contactless since 2009, and we can say that Italy, with UK, with Poland, it's one of the countries that now has the highest infrastructure for what concerns the contactless payments. As you can see, we have reached now 47 billion euro that were exchanged through these contactless payments. And the infrastructure, it is composed by 60 million cards, so more than half of the cards that have been issued in Italy, and 80% of the POS terminals. Almost 2 million POS terminals are now contactless in Italy. And as you can see, the growth rate also in the infrastructure is very good. We are reaching the maturity of our infrastructure, and we think that contactless payments will continuously grow in Italy with a combined annual growth rate that is about 20%. And we will probably reach 100 billion euro in 2021. Mobile POS, as I told you, plugins that enable smartphones to become the POS terminals, and the card readers are growing. We have 1.5 billion euro exchanged through mobile POS, more than 160,000 terminals with 100 transactions per terminal. They are, we estimate that they will continuously growing, and they will reach the target of 2 billion euro in 2021. But let's focus in these last minutes on the mobile payment, mobile commerce. Mobile commerce worth 8.4 billion euro. That is the 1/3 of the total e-commerce. It was a quarter in 2017, and it's continuously growing. We think that in 2021, mobile transaction, the purchase of goods and services through mobile online, will account for 50% of the total e-commerce in Italy, something like 20 billion euros. And mobile remote payments accounts for 1 billion, and these are the most used use cases. Half a billion is used to top up our phone. 130 million euros to pay the bills, fines, and so on. But the component that is growing the most is the one related to mobility. We have 180 million euros with a growth rate of more than 50%. And as you can see, we also analyzed which are the municipalities, which are the cities in Italy that offer this kind of payment solutions in the mobility area. And we have about 470 cities that are now offering these payment services related to sharing mobility, related to public mobility, and so on. They are growing at a compound annual growth rate of 10 to 20% from 2018 to 2021. And at the end, we can see the mobile proximity payments that are that have boomed in the last 2 years. As you can see, we are now we have reached €500 million in 2018, thanks to the arrival in Italy of international services such as Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, and Google Pay, but also thanks to some national application. One example is a Satispay that can be used in order to send money to friends, but also to pay online and to pay in store. More than 1 million Italians are now using mobile proximity payment method. Have used it in 2018, and they have spent something like €500 in the last year. So that was the mobile proximity payment market in Italy. We expect it to double year over year and to reach a total of 5 to 10 billion euro in 2021, thanks, especially thanks to NFC payment services such as Google Pay, Samsung Pay, and Apple Pay that have been adopted by all the major banks in Italy. Okay, thanks for the attention. I don't know if there are some questions.
Just one, we've kind of run out of time, but just one quick question on Italy. So I think there's some interesting market forecast there. I read yesterday that in the US actually, that Apple Pay had overtaken the Starbucks as the #1 mobile payment app, and I just wondered what the key apps in the Italian market were from your research.
Yeah, from our research, the main applications are the one that use the NFC technology.
Yeah.
Because as I told you, our contactless infrastructure is well developed, so we can pay with these applications wherever we want. And these are the ones that are increasing the most. Then, of course, we have our national wallets, such as Satispay, but it can be used just in merchants that have a partnership with Satispay. Yeah. They are constantly increasing this network, but of course the network of contactless payments, of NFC payments, is bigger. And the last application that I want to mention is Bancomat Pay. That is an application that has been built by the banks, the Italian banks.
Okay.
And work as a Satispay, but it will probably have a higher network of acceptance, because banks are the one that accept payments. So
yeah,
they will.
They're going to drive the growth.
Yeah.
So super, excellent. Well, that's us out of time. Thank you to Matteo for sharing all that information, both on Italy and the broader mobile payments and commerce landscape. You can see in the chat some information from the university on their other research areas when it comes to innovation and payments. So do check that out. There's plenty of research papers available there for you to refer to. So thanks again. The recording will be made available. The presentation will be made available for MEF members. Yeah, we hope to see you at a future briefing with MEF. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matteo. Cheers.